you've decided to start a video game studio. You've asked yourself why you're doing this, and you're happy with the answer to that. You've started the process of asking what kind of studio you want to make and what kind of game you want to build. As part of informing what, you are going to need to really ask yourself who you are and what do you bring to the table. Right off the bat, let me just make something clear that I've talked about before. There is no such thing as the idea guy. There is no role in a studio where your role is just to throw out ideas about cool things that could exist. Now, if you are the idea guy with a big bank account or access to a lot of venture capital money, then good news, you're not the idea guy, you're the money guy. And that is completely legitimately a role in a studio. You're the person who makes sure that the lights stay on and that people get paid. You're allowed to have ideas still, but that's not your primary role. Similarly, if you have a lot of contacts within the video game industry, that's a legitimate role within a studio because you're the one that can find people to join your studio and look for potential publishing partners. When a studio is really small, typically you don't have these non-dev roles exclusively. Small studios below 30 people, everyone's going to have to wear several different hats. So if you're the money guy, but you don't have a programming, audio, artistic, or design background, you may find yourself struggling to find the resources necessary to keep your studio going. Once you move beyond 30 people, these sorts of operational roles become not just desirable, they become a necessity. Your ability to be in this kind of role is going to be highly dependent on what kind of studio you're going to make. From the dev side, interrogate what you are great at, what you're capable of doing, what you don't know how to do but could learn how to do, and things that are simply beyond your ability. If you are an artist and you love making art, but you also have the ability to do a little bit of design, then those are skills that you bring to the table. You might be able to learn how to do audio, but maybe you just can't wrap your head around the programming aspects of game development. Recognize that that's a hole in your skill set. If you're going to start a video game studio, you're going to need to cover that hole somehow. If you're trying to start a solo studio, then you're going to need to find a piece of technology that allows you to do game development without having to do a lot of coding, something that provides a very strong framework. Similarly, if you're a designer who's done a little bit of programming, but you have wooden eyes and can't do any art, you're going to want to look for ways to cover that hole. Either you're making a game that has a art style that is within your abilities, so text adventure or something with a very specific kind of art style, or you're looking to hire a partner that is going to provide that visual language to your studio, or you are looking to buy a lot of assets off the asset store. Though, as recent events have shown, be careful with doing too much of that. When you're thinking about who, you also need to start to consider your blind spots and having diverse voices at the table. If you're a solo studio, not too much you can do about that. Your blind spots are your blind spots. You can interrogate them and try to at least understand where your problems are. Similarly, if it's a group of you and your friends, the diversity is going to be dependent on the diversity of that group. You're not necessarily bringing in any outside voices. You are going to have biases and blind spots. But again, you can at least interrogate those things and try to at least state them out loud so that you can try to avoid some of the pitfalls. As you move beyond the friend group size of studio, now you start to have an opportunity to start to cover blind spots, to start to move into the shadows of your biases and look for people that think things differently than you, or have worked on different kinds of games, or have had different lived experiences. This is a bit of a balancing act because you do want your studio to have a culture, to have norms, but you also want these other voices to be around to keep you from making big mistakes, to bring you new perspectives and new ways of thinking about things. So Look for opportunities to diversify your studio population, absolutely. As well, when thinking about who, think about what kind of storyteller you are. Are you a storyteller, a story crafter, or a story shaper? If you're bringing people in, this is an opportunity to bring in some people with different storytelling styles. The type of storyteller you are is going to inform the process you are going to go through in terms of finding publishing partners or venture capital money or other ways you're going to interact with the video game industry as a whole. If you are a story shaper with no contacts, you're going to have a lot of difficulty getting into those meetings in the first place. If you are a storyteller, you might find yourself having a lot of really exciting meetings in the hallway at GDC that then turn into nothing. And if you're a story crafter, the trick is to get someone to pay attention long enough for you to reveal the excellent story you've crafted about how great your studio is going to be. Each of these has weaknesses, and you need to figure out how you are going to get that initial meeting if you are a story shaper or a story crafter, or how you're going to follow up that excellent elevator conversation if you're a storyteller. Now that you better understand who you are and also who you are surrounding yourself with, it's time to also really reinterrogate the kind of game you're going to be making. Because what you might discover is the commonality amongst you and your team members isn't that you've all worked on racing games. Maybe it's that you've all worked on games with very strict parameters, or you've all worked on games with high action, and maybe you need to go back and re-examine the kind of game you think you're going to make. You may have assumed that you are all racing gamers, but maybe that's not the case. As we think about who, as we start to understand who we are and who the team is that we're building around ourselves, we're going to circle back to the what about what our studio is and the kinds of games we're going to make, and potentially even back to the why. Why are we even doing this at all? As we interrogate who we are and the people around us, we might realize that our reasons are different than we first assumed. Embrace that. Go back through the process and go back through and re-examine the previous questions. As we do this a little bit, we'll start to get into the final set of questions, which are more tactical, but are still worth answering as we start this process up, which are the questions around when, where, and how. We'll talk about those in the next video, and then we'll finish this series with me walking through these questions through a hypothetical game studio that I was starting. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We have merch now. If you're interested in picking something up, there's a shelf below this video. That helps the channel out as well. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up because that helps YouTube know it's worth sharing to other people. Who are you in the frame of this? What role would you serve in a brand new video game studio? Where are your blind spots? What are your weaknesses? Let's have a conversation about this down in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.